What's going on, guys? Pete Nova here with First Read Fantasy. We got a startup Superflex mock draft for you today. Stay tuned. This one's going to be fun. I'll see you there.
Counterfeit. I get done with one and move right on to another bitch. Yeah. College educated, she graduated.
All right, guys. I'm going to pull up my co-host here. It is Chris. That's Cronster on Twitter. That's Cronster SRQ. If you are not following him already, make sure you do so. Chris, how we feeling, man?
Feeling good today, man. Happy Sunday. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Ready to get
Yeah.
this thing going?
Well, I figured we'd hop on, get this done, right? And then I can go, run out and do my Father's Day duties. I'm not a father myself. I know you're not, but I am a father to a
Yep.
dog and a couple other animals. So, but I'll probably hang out with my dad, go shoot down there soon.
There you go. Sounds fun. Yeah, I got some stuff going on with my nephews. Probably gonna do a little barbecue today. Father's Day, right?
Yeah.
Wanna
Yeah.
cook and spend time with the family.
If the weather stays good, if it holds up.
Sure.
But all right, well, let me pull up the board here real quick, and I'm gonna go ahead and just start the draft. I will say this is going to be a super flex. Now it is a third round reversal. So just to make sure that everybody's aware that is watching, this is a third round reversal. Chris is here in the 1 spot. We have ZMac, coach from the Mediators, here in the 2 spot. Dynasty Degens is here at the 5 spots. Chev is here from FF Dynasty as well as Player Profiler. And then he's at the 1-7. I'm at the 1-9. And Chris, you're on the clock here. Superflex, what are your thoughts?
Yes, sir. Pretty easy pick for me. Superflex Dynasty. I know the age might scare some people off, and they may want to go Lamar or Jaden Daniels, but I think it's an easy Josh Allen for me. The other names that would have been in contention would have been Jaden Daniels, due to age and what we saw last year. Who knows what we see in the sophomore year? We know what Josh Allen is, and then the other option would have been Jamar Chase had I decided to go wide receiver.
Sure. Yeah, I mean with Josh Allen, I mean you really can't go wrong. I can listen to an argument for Daniels over Allen. With Lamar, I have a little bit more of a tough time just because, Lamar last year had such an insane season where I'm pulling up the stats now, but 41 passing touchdowns. He only had a season in 2019 where he had 30 or more in 2019. So he's only had 2 years of 30, we'll say 30 or more touchdowns twice. Last year he had 41. In 2019 he had 36. And then outside of that, the highest he's thrown for was 26 in 2020. So I do see some regression there from Lamar on that standpoint. Obviously getting up there a little bit in age, 28. I'm not super concerned, especially at the quarterback position. Now, if you're looking at Allen and you're looking at Lamar, very similar in age, Allen is just a guy that, to me, I trust that even if his legs maybe don't hold up as much, his arm is so strong. And I just think he'll probably age a little bit better, in my opinion, over Lamar. And even regardless, I'm still taking Josh Allen this year as my QB1 over Lamar.
Yep, and just to kind of add on to that, another way I look at it is, who's the heartbeat of the offense and on the team. Josh Allen clearly is the engine that makes that offense move. Baltimore, yeah, you could say it's Lamar Jackson. You could also say it's the running game, which right now, obviously, we know it's Derrick Henry. We know that he won't be there long term after the next couple of years, probably. But the Ravens just love to run the ball, and while Lamar does also run the ball, he kind of shares that, the engine that runs the team, so to speak.
Yeah, and honestly, I look at too, like I can see more of an argument for Jaden Daniels over Lamar. Now I understand the concern of it's a 1-year sample size, and so people might be a little bit worried about that. Is this going to be the norm for him? Are teams going to start to our team's going to start to key on him, right? Have more data and be able to prepare for him more since they know what to expect and they've seen him already. But overall, I still would take Josh Allen. I wouldn't knock anybody for taking Daniels. I would have a little bit more pushback again if it was Lamar over Josh Allen or Daniels. But I'm okay. I'm okay with going Daniels. It just with Lamar, like I said, I have more concerns of how he's going to age as opposed to Josh, and you're pretty much getting a complete reset with Daniels, who is 5 years younger than Lamar. So you're getting like a Lamar clone in some ways. I know it's a lazy way to analyze them and say, oh, they're the same player, because they're not. But just with the legs and that kind of upside there, you're getting something similar at least to what Lamar has been, but you're getting it at a huge age discount. Now, I go Justin Jefferson here at the 109. I was going to talk about it, but I wanted to make sure we
So
finished that kind of take. I take Jefferson there. Do you have thoughts on Jefferson? Do you have neighbors ahead of Jefferson? I know there are some people that do at this point. Are you one of those people?
I'm not. I would have probably taken Jefferson as early as the 1-6. I would have taken him over Bijan, Burrow, or Gibbs. I believe in building your dynasty roster through the wide receivers. Now, obviously, it's super flex, so quarterback is much more important in a league like this. But generally speaking, you're never going to have a bad roster build if you build through wide receivers and then outwards from there. I still take Jefferson over Neighbors. I trust the offense. I trust the coach. The player has done it for years, and he's still young. So we've seen one phenomenal year from Neighbors, and I know that there's more to come. But until I see more, I won't put him over Jefferson. I won't put him over Chase. I would still take Lamb over Neighbors as well myself.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with that, to be honest with you. I mean, Neighbors had an incredible season, right? I mean, the targets were off the charts. Let me pull his player card up really quick just so I have the exact targets in front of me. Last year it was 170, which is just absolutely bonkers.
Absurd.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta assume there could be some slight regression, but I don't think it's going to be that much either. Like, I think this is a guy that we're likely going to see somewhere around the 140 to 150 every single year, with maybe some down years where he's at like the 130 area. But there's also some possibility for turnover there, right? With the Giants, a new coach comes in. If it's a coach that really loves to run the football, right? Does that affect Neighbors? Where if the scheme changes, right? That defense got much, much better this year. So are they in more manageable games where they don't have to throw the football nearly as much as they did last season? I know they added Cam Scadaboo. They have Tyrone Tracy, who I'm not necessarily I was a big fan of Tracy at his cost last year, but I think Scadaboo's going to take that starting job at some point in this season. And so I mean, I'm with you in that. I think I could see a world where Lamb is ahead of Neighbors as well.
Yeah. It just goes back to, again, I've seen it enough times over the course of the past few years that I'm taking proven elite wide receiver talent. I'm not going to bat an eye at that over, someone who's coming into their second year on a questionable team just because he had an explosive rookie year. I don't build that way.
Yeah, I think building at the wide receiver position in Dynasty, is super common nowadays. I think personally, and we'll get into this a little bit, but I think the quarterback, having two strong quarterbacks is slightly overrated if you have an elite one, in my opinion. I don't think you necessarily have to reach if you have a Lamar Jackson. It's very nice to have like another high end, low end QB1 as your QB2 if you have a stud. But at the end of the day, to me, if you have an anchor elite quarterback like these three with Allen, Daniels, and Lamar, I like, kicking the can for the second QB position down the road a little bit and taking chances on like a Jared Goff later on, or like a Geno paired up with a Matt Stafford, right? Like that's usually what I like to do from a roster construction standpoint. So I can start hitting on, some of those elite wide receivers early on, right? If you go Allen and then you can, a lot of times you really, Lad McConkey and Drake London are two guys that usually fall at this turn here, depending on what league you're in, right? I mean, this is Superflex. I feel like people are starting to pull back a little bit from going so heavy on quarterbacks early, like we saw in recent years, where in this draft specifically, you're seeing a ton of teams right now that haven't taken a quarterback because there's still guys there, right? And they probably feel comfortable about what's going to come back to them. So they're going to grab those wide receivers, those high end guys right now. And that's what you're seeing going on in this draft so far.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm looking at the players coming up, and there's no quarterback I would consider taking. I know I'm still few picks away here, but there's no quarterback I would consider taking this high, knowing that I have Josh Allen secured for the next 5 years.
right. Right. And especially at that 1-2 turn, you're likely looking, in most cases, you're looking at Ladd, Drake London.
Yep.
Even if you wanted to hit the running back position, you have Bucky Irving. You have now, I think A-Chain and Trey are probably going to go here at some point. But it's not a perfect science. Don't necessarily get me wrong. This is just how this draft is falling currently. He gets auto pick Trey McBride there. But I do want to circle back to the FF Meteors here. And they said Neighbors is elite, same tier as JJ and Chase. Again, I wouldn't balk at that. I'm fine with going with Neighbors over CeeDee Lamb. I think there's an argument to be made for Brian Thomas over Neighbors as well, in my opinion. But again, we're really splitting hairs here with these young guys that, are going to be, we know Neighbors and Thomas, Lamb, Jefferson, they're not going anywhere, right, in the next 2-3 years, right? Unless you're expecting regression heavily for Neighbors and Thomas, who have only 1 year of sample size, right? But we're splitting hairs here, right? I think we get so caught up in the weeds of like who's the wide, like, who are the top 5 guys right now? Like it's Chase, it's Jefferson, and then it's usually some combination of Neighbors, Puka, St. Brown, or Neighbors, BTJ, Brown, or CeeDee Lamb. Like it's really splitting hairs in my opinion.
Sure.
So I try not to get lost in that too much. The one thing I will say, Chris, that we did forget is this is a 3rd round reversal. And so you do not, in this situation, get a quarterback, but you do take Marv there. If this was, and I don't know if you remembered if it was a reversal or not, would that have changed your mind? Did you remember it was a reversal? Would that have changed your mind at all?
I did.
Okay.
If I had the back-to-back, I probably would have prioritized taking a running back there.
Okay.
Just to get my first one off the board. I would have gone probably, running back, wide receiver. But with only one pick to make before I have to wait another round, I'm always going to take the wide receiver first. Whether I would have taken Bucky or Marv there, I'm going to take the player that's going to have the longer shelf life. I see a large step coming this year from Marv, and I'd rather just start building my wide receivers. I need at least 3 to 4 foundational wide receivers on my dynasty team, or I'm going to feel like I'm not able to compete long term.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think you're in a good spot here because the way the board falls, sometimes, like, I don't really hate how this has gone with the quarterbacks for a guy like yourself where you are, because you could take a quarterback at the 4-1 if you really wanted to, if you're into that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if now that we have the reversal, if it did not reverse, I could have made the argument where it's like my next 2 picks would be a good running back here in the 3rd, which would have been like the 3-9. And then on the way back, I could have taken a quarterback. Now at this point, I have to worry and read the room that there is likely a quarterback run coming. And that's why I probably am going to take a quarterback here. There's a lot of talent on the board, but I really do worry at this point that there will be a quarterback run coming. Now it's just a matter of which quarterback I like more between Nix and Herbert. I do like the rushing upside for Nix, but Herbert has some sneaky rushing upside as well. I'm going to take Herbert just because while I'm a Denver fan and I love Bo Nix and I really like him in Dynasty as well, Herbert has a stronger sample size. He's got good continuity with the coaching staff. I don't think Harbaugh's going anywhere. Same with Knicks, but Herbert also has sneaky rushing upside as well, and so I'm okay taking Herbert over Knicks there.
Yeah, and I mean, you're taking your first quarterback, so you want someone that's a little bit more established already in the
Yeah,
league. I'm not the biggest Herbert fan. I think he's a little overrated myself. However, when you're taking your first quarterback in a super flex league, you want the guy who has at least put up numbers year over year over the guy who just had a good rookie year. It goes back to taking, Jefferson over Neighbors, right? I'm not going to put Neighbors over Jefferson after one season. I'm not going to put Knicks over Herbert after one season.
sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Now you're coming up here, so get thinking on what you're going to do. I do want to pull this question up from M1 Trox. He said, "I am in the 8th spot. I don't like my first picks, both of from the same team, but they're both studs. What is your opinion?" So he gets Gibbs, St. Brown, and then he goes with Knicks. Honestly, you're getting two players that, if you believe that this offense can still be really good without Ben Johnson, I have no concerns about this, because Gibbs, like, I prefer Gibbs over St. Brown, right? Maybe would I prefer to go with Thomas or Puka just because I have Gibbs? I could see a world where you think that, but if you believe that the offense is still going to be as high powered as it is, I'm fine taking St. Brown and Gibbs, both. I would have taken BTJ and Puka because I have them over St. Brown, but I'm still okay with stacking both players again if you believe in that offense. Now, if we're talking about an offense that's not necessarily high powered, right, or and then I have some concerns, right, where you could talk about, maybe I'm trying to think of an offense that has two studs, like a Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, for example. You take Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall. I have concerns because I don't expect that offense to be scoring a ton of touchdowns, and so there's only so many to go around. But I guess that would be my take on it. Do you have concerns about his build with Gibbs and St. Brown and Knicks, like, or are you kind of in the same boat as me, where it's a high powered offense and I think they're okay?
Generally speaking, I don't have an issue with Gibbs, Amon-Ra. I'm not huge on stacking two skill positions, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, they were the number one offense last year, and while I don't think we expect them to be the number one offense this year, I also don't see a huge fall off, because they promoted from within. The talent is still there. Losing Ben Johnson doesn't scare me enough to move away from Gibbs and Amon-Ra. I do agree. I probably would have taken Brian Thomas if he was there, but he wasn't there. I'm still taking
Yeah.
Amon-Ra over Puka. I'm taking him over Nico. I'm taking him over London.
Okay.
So I like the picks.
Okay.
I
Yeah. And
probably the only thing I would knock is initially taking Gibbs over Jefferson or Neighbors. I wouldn't have done that, but I
okay.
don't hate the pick. It's just how I prefer to build my teams.
Yeah. And
And
you have those guys ahead of him in your just overall rankings in general.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And to talk about my back to back here, I was hoping AJ Brown or T Higgins would fall to me. I would have taken either one of them there had they been there. They weren't. So instead of reaching down for a wide receiver that I'm not the biggest fan of in a startup draft right now, I could have taken Tyreek or someone along that line. But I'm fine taking Jacobs. He's elite. He's 27. He's in an elite offense. There's my running back one. And then I'm going to take the rookie, Omarion Hampton here. Young, high-powered offense, wants to run the ball. Chargers are going to be a good team for the next few years, and he was their first-round draft pick this year. So the draft capital says he should be pretty safe. The value is just better for the running back for me.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. I mean, you're seeing the running backs, we're starting to thin out here slightly. Um, I'm in kind of a predicament here where I take Trevion Henderson. I prefer in a perfect world, I prefer Derrick Henry, but I'm reading the board here and I'm looking at what's around, and I thought to myself, do I prefer Trevion Henderson and Alvin Kamara, or do I prefer Derrick Henry and Quinshon Judkins? Because I don't want to. I love Henry and I love Kamara this year, but I don't want to stack both players, especially in Dynasty, because then I really have to hope that I can hit on some younger running backs later on in this draft. And the running backs are going to start thinning out pretty quickly, as we're seeing. I mean, in the last about 12 picks, we've seen about 9 go off the board. And so that was kind of my thought process there. Would you prefer Trevion Henderson and Kamara, or would you prefer Derrick Henry and Quinshon Judkins if you were building a team?
So seeing that you had to wait 6 picks, I think you have to just take the running back you like the most for your team long term. And while I love Derrick Henry for 2025, I think he's going to be a league winner again. He's not a long term play. He's a 2-year, maybe 3-year max play. I think he's got 3 years left with the Ravens, but he may not even play that entire contract. We'll see. Um,
Yeah.
I'm probably taking Travion Henderson there, like you did, because I love the upside for this year, and I love his upside moving forward, having just been drafted.
Yeah, and in this situation, 3 running backs go right after. Judkins is one of them. So if I did go the Henry route, Judkins wasn't coming back to me, and I would probably well, unless this guy preferred Henderson, right? I think Henderson probably would have went though, but again, we have no way of knowing that, so to speak. But in this situation, that's just kind of how the board falls. Now, it does work in my favor. I will take Alvin Kamara here because I've talked about Kamara, but this is a guy that, top 5 in points per game the last 2 years, and he's averaging over 70 receptions in both of the last 2 seasons. They extended him last year, even with the age. So I think, he's a guy that misses like 2 to 3 games a year. I'm okay with that. I think it's baked into his cost right now. And for a guy that's, if age wasn't a factor, right, which you could say about a lot of people, you could say about
Yep.
Henry, right? Like Kamara is obviously going much higher. But there's a world where Kamara is better than CMC, who gets picked, almost pretty much 2 rounds, not 2 full rounds, but a round and a half ahead. But I do love CMC this year as well, so don't take that as a knock.
I'm pretty out on CMC. I've been burned by him in the past, and I know most people who have are probably out on him. It's feast or famine, right? And I'd rather just be full and not have to worry about a feast, and just not have to worry about how many games is he going to play? Is he going to get hurt again? How is that going to affect my team? And then have the backups in place. And I just don't want the headache anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Now our buddy Big Draft Energy is in here. If you do not follow his channel already, go ahead and do so. That's Big Draft Energy on YouTube. Friend of the show. He's got a lot of stuff going on there. He really does. He pretty much drafts best ball every single day over there. Great follow, great friend of the show. So if you are not already and you're watching the show currently, please go ahead and give him a subscribe to his channel. It would mean a lot to myself, and I appreciate you being in here, man. Now, Chris, you're up here at the 512, and then you have another pick right after. I'll let you pick, and I'll talk about the board, and then you can give me a little bit of your thoughts as to your picks that you made. Now, I did take Herbert, and we talked about that before. I was looking at, the possibility of quarterbacks going on a run. They kind of do. Mayfield, Stroud, Drake May, Fields wind up going, before my next pick, right? If Herbert would have been in that cluster as well, so maybe Fields falls to me there. I'm okay with getting like Brock Purdy maybe as a QB1 and maybe pairing him up with Fields for Fields' upside. But I feel a little bit more comfortable now that I ended up getting Herbert, seeing those quarterbacks that did go off the board there. You go with Mike Evans, you go with DJ Moore on the turn. Your team is shaping out nicely. You have 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and the best quarterback, for fantasy, in my opinion, in Josh Allen. What are your thoughts on your team so far? Is there anything that you felt like you wanted a guy to fall to you and didn't? How has the board felt to you so far?
The guy I was hoping that would fall was Devonta Smith. Went 4 picks before I went. So my original plan was going to be, back to back DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, and I had Mike Evans as my backup pick there.
Sure.
I'm not really interested in the quarterbacks in that range because I already have Josh Allen. I'm not really interested in the running backs at that range. I have Jacobs, who is my stabilizer, and I have Amarian Hampton, who, while he may not be huge this year with Najee Harris there, long term, I mean, he's my 22-year-old starting running back of the future. So I've got my 22-year-old wide receiver in Marvin Harrison. So I just wanted some good foundational wide receivers to fill out those positions. I feel like it's going to give me more flexibility later. So I was pretty set on going wide receiver there. I know Mike Evans is a little long in the tooth, but the guy has never had less than 1,000 yards. The Godwin injury has everyone in Tampa a little unsure of what's going on with him. Igbuka is a fantastic rookie I'm very high on, but Mike Evans is still the alpha there until we see otherwise. So I have no problem drafting him there, even at that age. I think
Yeah,
he's 31, will turn 32 during the season.
Yeah, I'm drafting Mike Evans in a lot of spots. I'm feeling good with him still. I know it's scary with the age and there's concern there. But I like your team so far. I mean, Matt and the mediators are not the biggest DJ Moore fans. They think he's a little overhyped. At least Matt does, and I think Coach feels a little bit of the same. I'm not sure Tyler's take on him, but now I'm looking here at the wide receivers. I like my build so far. I'm checking out the tight end position. I could maybe go tight end. I think in this situation, I'm gonna take a chance. Part of me wants to go Tyler Warren, but I might be able to risk it on the way back. I don't really love the wide receivers in this range here. I think I probably may want to take a chance at running back. I'm not in love with Mixon either. What does the quarterbacks look like? Yeah, I mean,
You're not
oh
taking
man,
your
I'm
favorite
running out of time.
quarterback's favorite target this year?
Freaking DK.
Yeah, he's out there for you.
Nah, I'm gonna go with Olave just because I have such good wide receivers that to me it's worth taking a chance on him. A guy that I think has all the talent in the world. It's obviously he's a concussion away, and I know you have some concerns about Olave as well. But I just look at it like there's still not a ton of guys in that room. If he's healthy, like I think you're getting a borderline, 15 to 20 in terms of the wide receiver range for his finish. And I'm okay taking the risk just on the fact that I have Jefferson, I have Brian Thomas Jr. If Olave doesn't hit, like it's not going to crush my team because I'm not putting all my eggs in his basket as my wide receiver 3.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I like to pick Olave or DK probably would have been my pick there.
Yeah, I was running out of time. I was banking on the fact that, Tyler Warren might come back to me. I know his ADP says 85 here. In a lot of startup drafts, I've seen Tyler Warren go as high as like the back end of the 4th round. So I'm cool taking him here, but those are in a lot of premium leagues. So that's kind of, where it's like, if it's not a premium, do you really want to take a chance? Loveland's ADP being as far down as it is too in a dynasty, I don't think that's fully accurate. Sleeper's ADP is all over the place. I don't think that fully reflects. I mean, people are not taking Travis Kelce in startups over Loveland. They're taking Loveland over Jonnu. Maybe you can sway me on Mark Andrews, Hawkinson, and Laporta. People still taking those guys over Loveland, but that's why. So I mean, even if you took Loveland, I don't think it's that far of a reach. And so that's kind of where we're at. I do want to take my next pick, but I also have a question I do want to bring up and pose to you. But I'm gonna save that until I pick here so that I can kind of let me focus in here and see what are these out of these quarterbacks. I mean, is there a quarterback that sticks out to here for you out of JJ?
For me, it's easily Jordan Love. Yeah,
Okay.
Jordan Love just got picked. That's 100% where I go with that pick. He's only 26, I believe, which is extremely young for a quarterback. And we saw 2 years ago, we saw him finish as a top quarterback. And I know last year he had a down year, but he hurt his knee. He hurt his knee week 1, and then I think he strained his groin around like week 7 or 8. So he was dealing with a couple injuries throughout the season. And banking on the Packers offense and Matt LaFleur just doesn't feel like a bad bet to me. And again, we've seen it from Love, so we've seen him perform before. He's young, he's paid, he's locked into that offense. So I would have taken him without hesitation. I love that pick.
Okay. So I do want to dig in on a player, and it's Caleb Johnson. Now, Caleb Johnson, right, goes in the 3rd round to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a guy who ran a 4.57 40-yard dash. I'm not super concerned about 40-yard dashes for the running back position. He was 75th percentile on Player Profiler for speed score with 102.7. I don't hate Caleb Johnson. I don't. I feel like sometimes I come off as a guy who really doesn't like Caleb Johnson. I do prefer RJ Harvey over Caleb Johnson. My concerns with Caleb Johnson, and now Rodgers, I'm a believer in Rodgers. I think he can help them, but it's on a 1-year deal, right? So If he's
Yep.
not there, they're back in the same situation next year where they don't have a quarterback. And then who the heck knows, right? Is Arthur Smith even the OC next year? Like there's just a lot of mystery. But when I think about Caleb Johnson, a lot of people will bring up the volume, right? And that he's going to a system where they're going to really like him there. And I think Caleb Johnson is a talented player. My concern with Caleb Johnson is when you look at Najee Harris, who touched the ball the most out of all running backs in the NFL over the last 3 seasons. This is a guy who, on a points per game basis, Najee Harris, outside of his rookie season, which I'm not including in those last 3 years of having touched the ball the most, he's finished highest in points per game at 19 with 13.2 in 2022, right? And I don't think Najee Harris is a bad player, right? This is a guy that's ran for 1,000 yards 4 years in a row, right? He's averaged 4 yards per carry last year, 4.1 the year before that, right? And he's consistently caught the football a decent amount. But I have concerns that, Caleb Johnson's going to step into this offense and it's going to be the same thing, right? Like, it's an inefficient offense, right? The offensive line, I mean, I know they've made some upgrades, but I was looking at some predicted offensive line rankings by Joseph Bryan, who is Colt to Lay Stats on Twitter, and he's got a pretty good model. And right now, when he is projecting the offensive lines, the Pittsburgh Steelers are ranked 25th, pass block ranking 30, run block ranking is ranked 18th. So I don't think that this offense line is going to be much better, right? And he uses the Pro Football Focus's pass block and run block grades from last year. He also factors in age, draft capital, and some other things. That's how the model comes out with the rankings. But I just don't think this offensive line is going to take much of a step forward. And we haven't even touched the fact that Jaylen Warren is still going to be there. Do I think Jaylen Warren's going to get a 50-50 split with Caleb Johnson? No, but I do think Jaylen Warren is a solid, capable running back who many people a year ago were saying that there was a chance he took Najee's job. So what are your thoughts on Caleb Johnson? I know you're up to pick here, but are you taking him over RJ Harvey? Am I just high over my skis right now because maybe I'm a Broncos fan and I prefer Harvey, or, am I making sense to you?
It is making sense to me. Let me make this other pick. I'm just going to take him and see what I end up with. So, do you want to talk about my picks first or Caleb Johnson first?
Yeah, go with the Caleb Johnson, and we'll get back to the picks
Okay.
after.
So as far as Caleb Johnson, I agree with everything you're saying. I don't know that the Steelers are going to be very good this year, especially given the offensive line issues. I think the thing that makes me okay with Caleb Johnson, though, is the age. I think he's 21, you
Sure.
said. And that's what I was remembering anyway. Anyway, and while he didn't have a great 40-yard dash. I'm also not the biggest fan of the 40-yard dash in general. I think it's kind of a silly exercise. You're telling a player to run as fast as they can in a straight line in a sport where they don't necessarily run in a straight line that often while wearing pads and carrying a football. So you watch the tape, you watch him in college, he broke away from players. Like, he's game speed fast, and I'm okay with that. That's good enough for me. Also, historically, the Steelers usually are a pretty good running team. And while they may not have the best 2025 due to the offensive issues we were talking about, I like the player enough that on a dynasty team, I'm all in. I think he's worth a first round pick in a rookie draft. I think going in the sixth round where he went is about right. I'm probably taking him over RJ Harvey due to the age factor and the future factor. RJ Harvey is a better player to compete for a title this year. But also, when you're building a dynasty roster, you also have to weigh in, okay, am I trying to compete this year, or am I trying to build a foundation to compete year after year for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so you kind of fall into not necessarily a trap that I'm setting for you, but that's kind of the argument that I hear a lot of people say about the age with Harvey. And the reason that I push back on that is most running backs are not getting a second contract, right? Like with the team that drafted them. So I look at Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows, and to me, I don't care that RJ Harvey's 24 years old, to be honest with you. I want the better player. Now, if you're talking wide receivers, maybe I could understand because their shelf life's a little bit longer and they do get a second contract very often if they're very good. With running backs, it just doesn't happen consistently enough. And so the I'm not playing Dynasty and worrying about because a lot of people talk about trade capital, and it's like, well, what can I get for RJ Harvey if I'm trying to trade him in 3 years when he's 27 years old? I understand that Dynasty, you're always trying to look ahead of the curve, and that's super important. And I'm not going to sit here and try to say that it's not. But with Dynasty, I just think that sometimes people are playing so far into the future that they're never truly competing. And it's good to have a balance of both. I'm not sitting here saying that that's your strategy either, but to me, like, I just prefer the better player. I don't really love the whole, Harvey's 24, that like, I don't, if I don't get if RJ Harvey helps me win in 2 years because I'm on a roster that can compete, and I don't even think it has to be a quote unquote competitive roster. If he's really good, right? Like, people are going to want him in 2 years if they're competing and you're rebuilding, right? I try not to worry too much about the draft capital. Yes, all of these things matter, but I think we put way too much stock into something like that when, again, most people don't get a second contract. The other thing I would say is with Caleb Johnson, Najee Harris was a better prospect coming out of college, right? I don't think Najee Harris is a bad football player. I think the Steelers offense has not shown us that they are going to take the next step in the last 5 to 6 years. And unfortunately, like, I'm not going to sit here and say Arthur Smith I don't think he's as bad as people give him slack for. But I'm not in love with what that offense looks like, even with Aaron Rodgers. And so to me, Najee Harris comes out of Alabama in the first round. Caleb Johnson, yes, this was a very, very good running back class. But if Najee and Caleb were in the same class years ago, Najee's still going first round ahead of Caleb. I don't even know if Caleb, I'd have to look at the class to see where maybe Caleb's a back end second round pick instead of being in the third round. But overall, like, I think Najee was better, right? And so he struggled behind this to be fantasy relevant. My thing is, I just think that unless that quarterback situation and offensive line upgrades in the next 2 to 3 years, which I think is what you're hoping for, Caleb Johnson's going to be a low end to maybe a mid RB2, which with RJ Harvey in the system with Sean Payton, with the amount of targets that offense gives to the running back positions, wherever Sean Payton has been, he is going to give you RJ Harvey, to me, has low end RB1 upside. I don't see it with Johnson. I can't picture it unless there are major changes on that offense. And I can't predict that because Mike Tomlin has shown us nothing to say he's willing to bring in a young play caller and change his old school mindset. So that's kind of where I'm at. I know that it was long winded, and I want to give you a chance to kind of rebuttal as well.
I mean, everything you said is fine, and none of it's necessarily wrong. I think for me, it just comes down to I like Caleb Johnson as a prospect better than I like the RJ Harvey, and I'm getting 3 years youth in the player. So if I'm doing a startup draft again, like, I know you need to balance your ability to compete this year if it was, if it's a real startup versus what's my ability to compete in the future. I still like the players were different enough to me. Like, I liked Caleb Johnson enough over Harvey that I'm not going to let the landing spot deter me enough to flip the player order I would draft in for a startup. Now, if I'm in a rookie draft, that's different. I'm taking RJ Harvey first because me personally, like, if you go to my main Dynasty league, I'm a team that is a clear contender. So I'm trying to put a championship on my belt this year. I know that for a fact. I'm easily taking Harvey because the landing spot is better. The opportunity is better. The head coach is, for fantasy football, better. I agree with you on all of that. But if I'm talking, I still need to balance my roster with some long-term upside. And I just like Caleb Johnson better, and he's younger.
Yeah, I think I think at the end of the day, if the argument is that you just genuinely like Caleb Johnson and you're not a fan of RJ Harvey, the player, I can get behind that. That's totally okay. I think that's totally reasonable. To me, I don't really love the argument for age as much. At the end of the day, we can talk takes all we want. And I think this is where things, you go on Twitter, you go on social media, you go on YouTube, Reddit, wherever you consume your content, if you're reading articles, and we can say all these things, but the rubber meets the road when you're on the clock, right? Like a lot of
Right.
times people say what they think, what they feel, but when they're on the clock, a lot of times these people that are putting their takes out there are almost doing different things. I saw a guy yesterday who is a very prominent figure, Mason Dodd, who does Fantasy Flock, and he came out and said that, he's not a big, pretty much made it seem that, Devontae Adams is on his third team in 3 years, and all the experts and everybody that's smart loves Adams, kind of throwing shade as to, but he's like, as to maybe painting the picture that he's not in on Adams, right? But then
Right.
later on in the day, somebody took a screenshot while he was live and he drafted Devontae Adams in a BBM. So again, like, sometimes we all feel these things, but when we're on the clock, right, things are fluid and things change. In your situation, you might have a league where you have a ton of rookie picks, and you don't need a running back to help you now, right? And so your running back room might be set. Maybe you had Trevion Henderson in the first round and you have a good running back room. You might say, you know what? I don't need an immediate impact. I think Caleb Johnson's the better player, so I'm going to take Caleb Johnson because I don't need him to help me now. That I can understand, right? But it's never a black and white. I genuinely don't love the age argument too much. I think the mediators kind of sum it up pretty well, where they said, age matters, but this is where being a fluid manager matters. Solve the problem later. You have the length of the rookie deal, figure out if he's worth holding. And I think that's a good point as well, right? Like, take the better player and figure it out later. But again, everybody has different methods of how they like to draft. But let's close the book out on Caleb and Harvey. Let's talk about this draft and how things are going so far. You take Addison, Pacheco, Downs, and Bryce Young, all 4 of those guys since we started this last debate. How are things shaping out for you? You get your second quarterback. You take my guy, Josh Downs, who I love. What are your thoughts, on how things are kind of shaking out?
So I in that first back-to-back where I took Addison and Pacheco, I was hoping for a Loveland fall. That was probably the only tight end I would have taken before I just kind of punt that position further down the board again.
Yeah.
It doesn't scare me to have DJ Moore and Loveland because I may not even be starting Loveland week 1. I feel like if I draft Loveland, I'm also drafting a day 1 starter later and using him out the gates. He didn't fall, so I looked at the wide receivers. I thought there was a chance Egbuka could make it back to me. That's what I would have hoped for. Otherwise, Pearsall making it back to me. I figured one of those two had a high probability of making it back to me, or at least I was willing to take the gamble. So grab a running back, grab the starter for the Chiefs. He should at least provide me enough stable points to get by, right? Then the next turn comes. Pearsall doesn't make it to me. My next look was Jacoby Myers. I like him a lot. I'm a Raiders fan, so I follow it a little bit more closely. But bias aside, the dude never drops a pass. He moves the chains. He provides good PPR value. He didn't fall, so Josh Downs was my next pick automatically there. And then I started looking at the quarterbacks. I'm at a point now where I'm checking the quarterback on every turn to see what's left. Really, there was only a couple I would have been okay with starting day 1, and it would have been Bryce Young or Matthew Stafford. This is a dynasty startup. I have Josh Allen, who's 29. I'm going to take the younger quarterback for my quarterback 2, and I'll just grab another guy later if Young doesn't shape out. I feel like we saw a very large step forward from Bryce Young last year. I believe in Dave Canales. I followed him. I live near Tampa, so I follow the Bucs as well. And watching what he did here with Baker, and then go to Carolina, and you already saw shades of it in year 1 with Bryce after he got benched and came back. I think over the final, what was it? I think week 10 on. I don't remember when he came back, but once he came back, I believe he was a top 10 fantasy quarterback the rest of the season. So if any of that carries over, plus adding Ted McMillan, I think that's a solid quarterback too in the build I'm building right now. Now on the way back, we'll just kind of see what happens. I will say one player that I'm also very in on has not gone yet, and so I have an idea of who I'm hoping comes back. We'll see if he makes it past you, and then I'll talk about him.
Okay. Yeah, I go with Charbonnet here. I did want Stafford. I hope that there was a chance that Stafford comes back. In my head, I said, you know what? Okay, if Stafford doesn't come to me, at least I get Darnold, right? Like, I was banking on getting one of them. Now, I'm in a shitty spot. This guy's on auto pick. Darnold's going to go. If one of these two don't take him, he's going to get auto picked. I thought in a world maybe I should just pick for him. But I'm just gonna ride it out, right, and just go with what the board is saying. But I'm gonna be in a pretty tough spot with Herbert and really just banking on one of these other quarterbacks here. Maybe I think I got to go with Jackson Dart. Is probably where I want to lean. Oh wait, never mind. They didn't auto draft him Darnold, so that actually worked out. I thought I looked at all and I didn't see Evan Ingram ahead of Darnold, so I thought that was the next pick. But I'll take Darnold. I'm not in love with Darnold. I do worry about that offensive line in Seattle and how he reacts to pressure. So there is some concern for me with Darnold there. What are your thoughts on Sam Darnold in Seattle? JSN is JSN a guy that you're really high on? I have JSN as a borderline top, like about top 15 wide receiver, somewhere around 15, 16, 17. Where do you have JSN for yourself?
I think you're about spot on with JSN, the wide receiver. I like the volume and the opportunity he's going to get is outstanding up in Seattle. I know Cooper Kupp is there. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think he's as washed as everyone else believes he is. I do think he'll have some value there, but if anything, he helps JSN in my opinion. Because if he's not washed, he will draw enough attention that leaves JSN to actually work in the middle of the field. Darnold is the concern for me. I don't necessarily think what we saw last year is Sam Darnold. I also don't necessarily think what we had seen prior is Sam Darnold. He's probably somewhere in the middle. I know Kevin O'Connell puts together a very quarterback-friendly system, so I think Darnold is a little bit overinflated, and he's dropping from the Minnesota offense and that system and that offensive line to Seattle. So I do expect some regression. That's kind of why I didn't want to take him where I took Bryce Young. I feel like Bryce Young's arrow is pointing up, while Darnold is also probably pointing up. It could also be completely lateral or down. Like I just feel like we don't know. And so again, I'm give me the youth of Bryce Young in that situation. But I do like Darnold where you got him. I have my concerns, I guess.
Yeah, I take Darnold because I'm not really in a great spot to. I mean, I could have went with Shuck or Rogers, but I just need a longer term guy, and I think Darnold, where there are concerns, at least he provides some value on a 2-year window. I know he signed a 3-year deal, but it's really like it's not the way the guarantees are set up. Like there's a chance he's not there long term. I would have preferred Stafford, to be completely honest with you, but just how the board fell. But I did at least get lucky that I even got Darnold to come to me when Stafford got picked. Now you're on the clock. You take Keon Coleman, and then you have one more pick here. What are you seeing on the board, and who are you looking at? Is there anybody you're in between on, or is it pretty easy pick for you?
Originally, the easy pick would have been Trey Harris. He was in contention for me where I took Bryce Young. The only reason I didn't is, again, looking at the quarterbacks, I wasn't liking my projection of what was going to make it back to me. And looking at where I'm at now, I'm very happy I took Bryce Young. It cost me Trey Harris, but that's okay. So I went ahead and grabbed Keon Coleman, second round pick from last year with the Bills. I have Josh Allen, so it made sense to get me a target for him, work on a stack there. Now I'm probably just going to grab a running back that I can plug in if I need to, maybe bank on some upside. I'm just going to take Tank Bigsby here. I don't think Travis Etienne is it. Bigsby is a solid player. He's young, and it's just kind of filling out a bench spot right now just to see what I have later.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it, right? I mean, Pacheco's a win now guy, right? Like he's not necessarily young. So I mean, I don't mind going 4th running back there. I kind of got greedy a little bit at wide receiver, where I took Calvin Ridley and Pearsall here, even though I was pretty set on wide receivers. But I'm kind of like you, where I try to build around wide receivers. I could always trade for veteran running backs to fill out my roster. You can always acquire older veteran running backs. Now, I do take Charbonnet here. I did talk about Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker on the show yesterday. I really was not a huge fan of Charbonnet coming out. I know a lot of people were extremely high on him. I wasn't, but when you look at Kenneth Walker, he missed the most games of his career last season, and he's never finished a full season healthy. I look at Charbonnet, who had more receptions than Kenneth Walker last year. And he had a 38%. He was ranked 38 on opportunity share, 43.3% of the opportunities, which is total team running back carries plus targets, went to Charbonnet, who ranked 38, and snap share, he ranked 32. He had 51.3% of the snap share. Kenneth Walker, I believe, was in the top 10 for opportunity and snap share. I don't have him pulled up in front of me, but to have as many receptions as he did at 42 receptions, and to be at that snap share and opportunity share speaks volumes. This is a guy, and this is probably going to surprise you unless you were watching the show yesterday. Zach Charbonnet ran the second most routes of any running back in the NFL last year. That was pretty surprising to me when I read
That just
that.
made my head turn. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he ran the second most routes of any running back. So if there's regardless if there's an injury or not to Kenneth Walker, I think there's a good floor for Charbonnet, who last season, Charbonnet last year had 11 points per game, right? That's not great. It's not terrible, but he's a guy that you could possibly flex depending on how deep your format is,
If
right? Even if Walker doesn't get hurt, which he has a history of, right? And I think
if
Walker's on a contract year as well.
if I'm building a team through, so we're going to talk super flex, right? If I'm building a team through Josh Allen, Bryce Young, and then a wide receiver room that I feel pretty confident in a world where I didn't have Pacheco, in a world where I didn't have Pacheco and I had Charbonnet, and you told me I could get 12 points a game out of him, but I have solid wide receivers and quarterbacks, that's a fine RB2 for my build.
Sure.
Because I'm not
Yeah.
starting a Hampton day one, right? I'm starting Pacheco, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. But
Well,
if
and
you
you
told
could
me
always
Charbonnet is going to get 12 points, then I'm probably happy with that.
well, and you could always again trade for veterans. They're
Sure.
always available. People always undervalue
Also,
guys like, Connor, Jones. You're taking risks, but they're also not very expensive assets.
we're talking about a Seattle team that turned the page on their wide receiver room. They turned the page. I mean, they kept JSN obviously as a first round pick, but no more DK, no more Lockett. They turned the page on their quarterback room. No more Geno. It's a new coach, right? It's his second year there. He didn't draft Kenneth Walker. He didn't draft Charbonnet either. But now
Yep.
Kenneth Walker is hurt already, and the season hasn't even started. Don't automatically assume that Walker's going to be getting an 80% workload. Like, you just can't at this point. I wouldn't be that surprised if it was closer to a 50-50 split. And if Charbonnet gets hot, why wouldn't the coach start him? The coach is trying to win games. So
Yeah, and they bring in Clint Kubiak, right, as the guy right here. So that's encouraging, right? He comes from that Shanahan tree, that outside zone run scheme. I think both guys can be very effective in that scheme. I love Kenneth Walker if he's healthy in that scheme specifically. But I think overall, to your point, Ryan Grubb was brought in last year. A lot of us, including myself, assumed Grubb was going to have them throw the football a ton last year. And unfortunately, that did not work out. The running game was super inconsistent, right? They didn't stick to it many times, and the offensive line was an absolute mess. They fired him after one season. I think that's pretty telling. And I think that tells me that they want to run the football effectively. And that's why they brought in Kubiak, who comes from that Shanahan offense, that outside zone, outside run scheme. And I think it's a good situation for both guys to thrive in, no matter which guy's getting the ball. But again, I will say Walker does have issues staying hurt. And there is a world, if you told me at the end of the season, hey, by the way, Kenneth Walker halfway through the year lost the job to Charbonnet, I would not be surprised
that
because of
sounds
the
right.
injuries,
My
because of the
my question would
you
be,
know,
what was the injury? That'd be my first question.
well, which one, right? I mean, and I
Exactly.
love,
What was the
I like
injury?
Kenneth Walker coming out of college, so
So do
it sucks, but
I.
ah,
I actually was, and this is not really related to the mock, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because we're talking
sure,
about Ken Walker. So I was actually in discussions with someone in my primary league, the league that I've been in, same guys for the last 5+ years, right? I was in discussions on acquiring Ken Walker from a team that he's like right on he's a rebuilding team, but he's turned the corner and he's on his way back up. He's on pace where I feel like he could compete this year, but he's got a little too much strength at running back, and he's got some really good young wide receivers and no alpha. So
right,
I was in discussions with sending something. I think it was something along the lines of like AJ Brown and David Montgomery for Kenneth Walker and a future first, right? Because I'm fine sending a player like that to a team that I don't view. He's not going to be competing with me in the championship, so I won't.
sure,
I won't have to sit there and watch AJ Brown beat me later. That's fine. And it's a little bit of a hit on value, but I love the player of Kenneth Walker, and I love the future first is how you keep from having to full rebuild as a contender.
Sure.
This was the day before the injury. We were talking about this, and it was one of those things where, okay, I think we like the deal. Let's see how we feel tomorrow. Let's sleep on it, whatever. And then the Kenneth Walker news breaks, and I told him, I was like, I can't do it now. I'm not.
Sorry, bud.
It completely changes my outlook on Kenneth Walker because we haven't even started the season yet, and he's already banged up. That's not good
Yeah.
because of exactly who it is, and we know the history. It scared me off the player.
I look, again, we talk about the fluidness, things are fluid, things are changing, right? There's only so many guys I have very strict rules of, like, I will not draft, right? Very strict rules. I was not very much in on DK Metcalf. I still have concerns about DK Metcalf, right? But I can't tell you that if Rodgers is somewhat decent this year, okay, he is a guy that hyper focuses a top end funnel to one guy, and there is not a
Yes.
lot of weapons there. So I don't know that DK is going to give you a top 12 season, but you're looking at a guy who kind of somewhere on the cusp of top 20 wide receivers, somewhere at that 20, maybe 15 at the best, if he has a nice bounce back, right? But
The
that's a guy I wasn't drafting, but I did draft him in a BBM the other day, even though I was adamant that I did not want to touch him. But new
I'm
information, maybe
gonna
you change your thoughts sometimes.
I'm gonna jump in a little bit on the
Yeah.
DK thing. I agree. I don't think he's got top 8, top 10 upside. I don't think it's gonna happen in the
Sure.
offense. We've already talked about the Steelers offense and our concerns with them, right? However, because it's Rodgers and because of hyper targeting, because they have nobody else, I think what Calvin Austin is their wide receiver too. That's
Roman
not
Wilson.
yeah. Does that matter? Like is Roman Wilson anything? Like
I
you know what
liked
I mean?
Roman
Like
Wilson coming out, but I don't think they like him that much.
exactly. The team isn't telling us that they like him with how he's been. There's nothing coming out about him. The team isn't putting any clips. Like look at him in year 2 in OTAs. There's no fluff whatsoever coming out about him.
Right.
So it's DK. It's DK and nobody else. So I also don't feel he has less than a top 24 floor. Like I feel he is easily a wide receiver 2 with
Sure.
possible wide receiver 1 upside. So I think he's a fine pick. He's also 27, I believe, same age as AJ Brown.
I think he's
27
about
is
27.
27 is old for a running back. Like you're starting to get concerned there. But for a wide receiver, I mean, he's still in his prime for 2 more years, and he's still got a good 2 to 3 years after that. Especially you look at his physical stature, he's built to play longer.
He is. My biggest concern with Metcalf, really, when it comes down to it, is just like his metrics last year. Right, he was number 1 in deep targets last year, and air yards was number 9 in air yard share, and then number 11 in air yards total. And he ran a ton of routes last year, ranked 16th, was 14th in route participation. The biggest concern for Metcalf for me was the contested catch rate, right? This is a big time receiver. He's a big body, but he does not play like a big, over the rim wide receiver. This is
Sure.
a guy that, if you look at his contested catch rate, 19.2%. He had 26 contested targets last year, and he only caught 19.2 of them. I'm trying to do quick math here, but that's about five catches out of 26 targets that were contested. He
Yeah.
ranked 100 in the NFL last year. And for a guy his size, that's concerning, right? I feel like
Right.
Metcalf is a player that you're wanting and waiting for him to just like be a grown ass man, and outside of the antics where he argues and fights with people in between plays, like he just like sometimes he just doesn't play like it.
No, I think that's fine. I mean, he definitely has his concerns. That is one thing I'm happy he ended up in something like Pittsburgh because Tomlin won't stand for it. I
Yeah.
feel like we could see some of that diva nature at least get a lid put on it. The Steelers seem to be good at lidding those kinds of players, but then what happens is they leave Pittsburgh. They produce because Tomlin will get them to kind of turn that volume down a little bit. They produce and then they go get paid somewhere else, and then that diva comes back. Martavis Bryant had his issues outside of Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson, Antonio Brown, right? Like that's kind of what wide receivers do after Pittsburgh. But in Pittsburgh, all of these guys were very good and productive.
Sure. No, I can definitely agree with you on that. I think My thing is, if Rodgers is gone from a dynasty asset perspective. If Rodgers is gone after this year because it's a 1-year deal, which honestly, unless Rodgers retires, I think he's coming back, right? Like to the Steelers.
Sure.
I think he comes back, right? If he unless he's retiring, because if it's a shit show again and it's a bad season for him, I think he's just gonna hang it up. Like he was like I think that's where he's at. And again, I'm fine being in the minority. I think Rodgers looked good down the stretch last season, and it was a shitty situation with the Jets. I'm not going to sit here and say he was not part of that problem, right? He brought in some of his own guys and stuff, but like there was reports last year that Nathaniel Hackett didn't even know that Breece Hall was someone that they should use as a receiver, and only realized halfway through the year that he was a good receiving back. Like there just so much incompetency with the Jets. You had
Yeah.
talks about Woody Johnson's grandson was like in the locker room like after and during games and stuff and was helping his dad. Like it was just such a mess. I think that arm still has life in it. Is he a headache? Yes, I understand that. That's fine, but I do think he has some life, and for this year alone, that could be beneficial for Metcalf if he's a wide receiver 3 on your team. If he's your wide
I
receiver
have
2 in Dynasty, I have a little bit more concern there.
Sure. I have less concerns with Rodgers in Pittsburgh because of the coach and the culture that they have there. Had he
Sure.
gone to New Orleans or Cleveland, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
The personality wise worries me much less, just like with DK, because of the landing spot. So I'm fine with him. I actually made him my last pick. That was a Pete pick for you. He was the last pick of the
I
draft.
saw that. But the funny thing is, I was pulling up that model for the O line rankings. Steelers are ranked 30 in O line for pass blocking. So again, that worries me with Rodgers a little
hmm
bit that he could get the shit kicked out of him a little bit. But
That actually worries me with Caleb Johnson for 2025, going back to that, because we know Caleb Johnson is not the best pass protector, and we
sure.
know Jalen Warren is phenomenal. So I think Jalen Warren will be on the field a lot this year to help with that.
Right, and that's the receiving work for Caleb is something that worries me too. I don't know if it was an Iowa thing. They don't really throw the football to running backs nearly a lot, so I can understand. Like maybe he's better than what he showed as a receiver. But what I will say is let's get into these rosters. Let's take a look at
I was
yours. Let's
just
take
going
a
to
look at
ask you.
mine. And then I do want to pull out a roster that we really like as well. So we can do that. But
Sure.
why don't you read off your roster first? Tell me a guy that maybe you're not really in love with that you drafted and maybe you felt like was a mistake. And then maybe give your favorite pick on the board based on where the board fell.
I mean, pretty easy start, right? Starting out with Josh Allen, pairing him up with Bryce Young, and then at running back, I'm going to be rolling out Jacobs, Hampton, Pacheco. Obviously, Pacheco's my starter to start, but Jacobs, Hampton, Pacheco, Bigsby, Algier. Wide receiver, Harrison, Evans, DJ Moore, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, Keon Coleman. You can tell I have an addiction problem with wide receivers. And then tight end, I got Isaiah Likely. So my favorite pick of the draft might be Isaiah Likely because like for long term after this year, I don't think Andrews is with the Ravens beyond this year. And I was surprised I likely fell that far. I think he's the automatic starter and he's a good player. It's not just a future opening on the team. We've seen him without Andrews on the field and he's a stud. I think. I feel like he's a stud. He's going to be in a great position after this year. So I like that pick a lot. Another pick I liked a lot was getting Jordan Addison where he went. Um, we've seen the explosion from him. We've seen how well he works with Jefferson on the field. Again, I trust the offense. I don't have that many concerns with McCarthy because I love Kevin O'Connell and I just love that team. Um, a pick that I probably would have liked to go somewhere else if I could have would have been probably Mike Evans, just for the simple fact that, there was Roma Dunze, there was Devonta Smith, there were other players I was hoping would drop and they didn't. I'm okay with Mike Evans, but for future, there's not a lot there. And then the other one would have been, had I known Egbuka would have gone that quickly, I should have just taken him over Pacheco and punted my running back because I don't care about running backs. I can
Sure.
trade for him. I can draft him later, in the future. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, I honestly, there's a world where I prefer Scadaboo over Pacheco. And you could argue if you went Ibuka and got Scadaboo, 2 rounds
Sure.
later, right? And even maybe doubled up on running back at that turn, you might have felt a little bit better. But I think it's a good team overall. I do want to give pushback, but I don't want to spend too much time on the Likely and Andrews thing. I do have some. I think there's a world where Andrews is not there after this year. I also am not buying into the coach speak of Isaiah Likely's going to take over this room this year. Andrews had 11 touchdowns last year. I know people's lasting image is him in the playoffs letting the team down, but he had the most touchdowns of his career last year. He was tight end 7 last year on a points per game basis, tight end 6 for full points. And while I like Isaiah Likely, he does have some concerns when it comes to playing in line. He is not really the best blocker. He can do it, but he's not the best. And both of these guys are, interestingly enough, on contract deals. So you can look at it a couple of different ways. If Isaiah Likely does take a step forward and ends up being really good, does he price himself out of that team and they just bring back Andrews on a cheaper deal next year? Or is there a world where Andrews plays you could also make the case that Andrew plays really, really good again this year. He's only 29 years old, and for a tight end, that's really not bad. And Andrews plays really well, and he takes, somewhat of a discount on an extension after this year because the team's just like, we don't want to make him walk. Because with Andrews, I just feel like if they really wanted to move on from him, they probably could have, because he was in the trade rumors of is he going to get moved or not. And I just feel like they would have, because like they probably could have netted some decent trade capital for him. Now he's going into a contract year and they're not going to get anything for him unless they make a trade at the deadline, which if they're a contender, I don't think they will unless Andrews looks absolutely awful this year. But again, I think part of the reason he looked bad last year in the beginning was more so because he had that tightrope injury. And they do say a lot of times that it takes an extra year to kind of get back from that. That's what Cooper Kupp, I think, had too. And Cooper Kupp's just not the same guy, I think, at this point too. But that'd be my only pushback, but
Sure.
I think your team looks good. I will say I love getting Addison and Downs. I don't mind getting Evans there because, quite honestly, you have youth with Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Evans helps you in a win now situation. And Addison and Downs are young enough where, even DJ Moore is not that old where you're going to get a couple more years from him.
Sure.
And he can slot in at your wide receiver too, unless Addison or Downs take that next step this year. And you even have Keon Coleman, who I'm not in love with. I did just recently draft him in a startup too, but he's young too. And so, he could also maybe have a good year too, and maybe be your wide receiver 3 going into next year.
Sure. It also, if I'm looking at Keon Coleman in a draft right here, there's probably some other names I would normally take, but when you have Josh Allen,
Yeah.
I'd rather let me just make the stack. If it hits, it's going to hit really well. So rather just take that dart throw, take that flyer there. And as far as the Likely, if he does play really well and price himself out of the team, that means he's probably putting up a lot of yards and touchdowns because he's not the best blocker, and he's going to get starter tight end money from another team
Sure.
and be their starting pass catcher. And now I have that moving forward. So
Yeah.
I stand on the Likely pick. I'm not going to be good at tight end this year, but in a startup, I feel like you're always punting something.
Yeah.
None of the tight ends I like fell to me, so I'm saying screw the position. I will figure it out later.
Yeah, and we only go 15 rounds here, right? I mean, Zach
Sure.
Ertz still on the board, and for as much as people clowned me and Hoff last year for saying Zach Ertz was a good value pick, he's a guy that was top 10 in points per game last year and a top 10 tight end, right? Like you can
How,
still get him in if this draft kept going as a guy that if
how,
Likely doesn't hit, he could slot in for you a couple times.
how much weight are you putting into the concept that, right now Ertz is paving the way for Ben Sinnott, just like Ertz paved the way for McBride? Like they're following the same archetype
I
or
I I
like the
like
pathway, same pathway.
I love Sanat. I have him in a lot of leagues. So I'm with you. The only thing I'll say is that, Ertz comes from the Cardinals after um, his time with the Eagles and his familiarity with Cliff. I think that's why we saw him on the field as much as we did last year. I think his familiarity with Cliff is in part, and I think there's a comfortability. That offense does not have a ton of weapons on the receiving end of things, so I don't think they're just going to kind of move over and give Sanat. I think there's a good chance Sanat lines up in the backfield, right? Like as a fullback, H-back kind of thing. I think Sanat will start to take strides this year. I've heard reports he's looked really good in camp, and I'm hoping.
So
But I
I'm
still think Ertz will be out there. I just,
he will be 100%. They're going to use him. They just gave him, I think, a 2-year deal to
yeah,
maintain. I'm more for, I think it was 2 years, right? Not just one.
yeah, I think so too.
I'm more talking. So in Arizona, you have Cliff Kingsbury. They draft McBride in the second round.
Sure.
Zach Ertz is there. Zach Ertz plays the entire first year, except for I think a game or two where McBride looked really good, but they went back to Zach Ertz when he was healthy.
Hmm.
Following year, Zach Ertz is the starter for the first half. I think he went down with injury because he has missed a lot of games, a lot of injuries throughout his career.
Sure.
McBride takes over and never looks back. It was like a year and a half in. Now you fast forward to Washington. You have Cliff Kingsbury. You have Ben Sinnott drafted in the second round. You have Zach Ertz play the first season, and now all the hype is about Ben Sinnott. He is looking good in camp. If
Sure.
something happens to Ertz this year, I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying you bank on that, but it's just funny
Yeah, no,
how closely the
is.
situations are to
It
each
is
other. It's
it
just
is
crazy.
ironic. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think it is ironic, and I would love nothing more than Sanat to take over that role.
Is it Ben
And I think
Sinnott or
there is
Ben
a world.
Sinnott? I honestly don't know.
I don't know either. We talk about so many names live
I
that
know.
like
I know.
I never I mispronounce so many names. It's just you kind of just go with it.
Just like
Um,
was it Tyler Beatty or Tyler Bidet? I
yeah,
think it's Bidet. Yeah.
Bidet, and then there was another one I can't remember. Last year we used to always like Ricky Pearsall, those kinds of things. But yeah, the
Talk about
last
your
thing
picks.
what'd you say?
Well, so we didn't talk about your picks. Favorite pick,
Yeah,
least favorite pick. Where you at?
yeah. So my roster, let me pull it up real quick. So I go, yeah. I mean, I got Herbert right. My quarterbacks are solid. I mean, I get Darnold and Dart as guys that I could put in the super flex. Receivers, it's hard to not like my receiver room, at least for me. I get
Yep.
Jefferson, I got Brian Thomas, I get Olave, which I did clarify when I took Olave that while I understand the risk with him, my wide receiver 1 and 2 are so good that like I'm willing to take a chance because in this scenario, I like Calvin Ridley. I think he's a solid buy this season. I just if you are still watching, I did drop a video for my undervalued dynasty buys. If you are still here, go check that out. And he's one of them. So I Ridley could slot into the wide receiver 3 if Olave ended up not panning out or he gets a concussion or whatever. But I know what I'm getting with Olave when he's on the field. So
Sure.
obviously Pearsall too. So I mean, it's hard not to like the receivers. The running back room is definitely a little sketchy. I get Henderson and Kamara. I love Henderson, right? But there's a world where I don't have a running back finish top 12 total fantasy points. Kamara, I did tout as a guy who's finished points per game wise in the top 5 the last 2 years, but there is a world where I don't have a running back that gives me top 12 finish. I do take Charbonnet, who we did talk a lot about. And I honestly, I do like Rachaad White. He's also an undervalued buy, in my opinion. When we talked about the routes run for Charbonnet, Rachaad White ran the 3rd most routes of any running back in the NFL last year, and he is a better pass blocker than Bucky, like not even close.
He
And I
is.
love
I think
Bucky.
his usage went down a lot last year because he was getting banged up with a couple. I think he had a couple like kind of lingering issues that weren't keeping
Yep.
him off the field or out of the game, but clearly hindering him. He's not an efficient runner, but he's a fantastic pass catcher. So I think you, in a
Yep.
pinch, like you can throw him in and probably have a pretty safe floor of, maybe 3 to 5 catches in a game, even if he's
Yep.
not putting up a ton of yards.
And he scores touchdowns. I mean, that's
Right.
the thing too. Like he's a guy that can score at the goal line. I did
And he's
take a
on a good
chance on
offense.
What'd you say?
Take players on good offenses
Yep.
also.
And they're going to be in situations with the weather being nice. And that defense, that all defense stinks. That offense threw the ball top 10 in the NFL last year, right? And Bucky and him both got 50 plus targets. He got more targets. I think if Bucky had came on quicker, or they gave him more of a leash, there's a world where Bucky probably out targets him. But again, I love Bucky. This is not shade on Bucky. I just think we focus so much on ceiling for players that we at times forget flex plays and depth is important. There are going to be injuries during the season. And if you had to plug in Rachaad White in the season in a good offense, like you said, that's going to be scoring a lot of points because their defense stinks, White can give you a 10 to 12 points in a dynasty. Redraft is a little different, right? You have to pick guys up and drop them. So there's a lot of available players. In dynasty, there's not a guy you can pick up in a pinch usually out there on waivers if you don't have a ton of depth. And then I take Jalen Wright, I take Jalen Noel. I don't have to spend too much time. And then I take Tyler Warren. I would try to get a veteran like Zach Ertz too. Someone that I can maybe get a spot start here and there. And that's it. I do want to take a look really quick before we get out of here. Appreciate, I see more people flowing in on YouTube. Appreciate you guys coming in here. If you have not already, give us a like on the show. If you did miss this week, you can always go back and rewatch it. I will also say that I did drop again top 5 undervalued players to buy in Dynasty. That dropped yesterday and it's picking up some steam. So feel free to go check that out. I mean, I'm obviously a little biased, but I think it was a good video. But I'll drop the link in here for anybody that wants to check it out because we are going to head out of here. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. If you guys did draft with us and you are here, thank you so much. Scott, thanks for jumping in here late. And we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys. Happy Sunday.